Here we go. Are you ready, boys?
Country radio in the 1970s had rules, and country artists broke every single one of them.
Yeah, everybody knows that you've loved once.
The stories behind these bands are wilder than you think. Preachers, senators, the Grand Ole Opry, and the FCC all tried to silence these songs, and every single time, they made them bigger.
10 years to think it up, though.
Welcome to Old Trails Archive. Today we are counting down 13 country hits from the 1970s that got banned, censored, or pulled from radio. And not a single one of them went down quietly. Number 13, Sammy Smith. Help Me Make It Through the Night, 1971.
Take the ribbon from my hair.
Chris Christopherson wrote this song after reading a single line from a Frank Sinatra interview in Esquire magazine. Sinatra had been asked what he believed in, and he answered, booze, broads, or a Bible, whatever helps me make it through the night. Christopherson took that line and turned it into a country song about asking a stranger to stay until morning. Multiple artists passed on the song before it got recorded. Singer Dottie West turned it down because she considered the subject matter too risky for her audience, and Christopherson cut it himself first without much success. Then Sammy Smith got hold of it, changed one word in the opening line to shift the story's agency to the woman, and delivered a vocal so raw and unhurried it felt like a confession.
Tonight, I need a friend.
Country radio had serious reservations. This was a woman openly inviting a stranger into her bed without apology or consequence, and for 1971 that was a line most programmers did not want to be responsible for crossing. Several stations refused to add it, and others played a restricted rotation, nervous about listener complaints from more conservative markets.
Dead gone.
The band did not hold. The song hit #1 on the country chart in February 1971 and crossed over to #8 on the pop chart, and both Christopherson and Smith walked away with Grammy Awards. The public had already decided country radio was the last to know.
Help me make it through the night.
Number 12, John Denver, Rocky Mountain High, 1972.
He was born in the summer of his 20s.
Denver wrote this song about a single camping trip near Aspen, Colorado, where he and his wife watched the Perseid meteor shower come down over a cloudless mountain sky. He later told Rolling Stone it took him 9 months to finish the lyrics because he wanted the words to hold the exact feeling of that night. Co-written with guitarist Mike Taylor, the song was the title track of his 6th studio album, released in September 1972. The trouble came from one line, friends around the campfire, everybody's high, and it arrived at the worst possible moment. Just 18 months after the FCC had issued a public warning telling broadcasters to screen songs for content that could be interpreted as promoting drug use. Stations across the country pulled it without asking any further questions.
When it first came to the mountain.
Denver was not quiet about it. In 1985, he testified before the United States Senate on the subject of music censorship and used the song as his opening example, telling Congress the ban was obviously done by people who had never seen or been to the Rocky Mountains and had no understanding of the spiritual awe the song was actually describing. He called it a clear case of misinterpretation, and he was right. The song peaked at #9 on the Billboard Hot 100 despite the bans, and in 2007 the state of Colorado made it one of 2 official state songs. The highest honor a piece of music can receive in the place that inspired it. The censors banned a man watching a meteor shower. They lost, and Colorado made sure the record reflected that.
A friend kept his memory.
Number 11, Charlie Rich, Behind Closed Doors, 1973.
My baby makes me proud.
The song's origin starts not in a recording studio, but in a congressional hearing room. Songwriter Kenny Odell kept hearing the phrase behind closed doors on the news while Congress held closed sessions to investigate the Watergate scandal, and he thought it sounded like the title of a love song. He wrote it specifically for Charlie Rich, and producer Billy Sherrill shaped every line around Rich's voice, which was smooth and soulful and effortlessly intimate in a way that made the suggestive lyrics feel even more pointed.
Lord, don't she make me smile.
Rich had been in the music business since 1960 and had gone 9 single releases without cracking the country chart. This was a man who had spent 13 years looking for one big song and the one that finally arrived was the one radio did not want to touch. Several stations refused to add it, with programmers deciding the lines about a woman who lets her hair down and makes a man glad he's a man were just a little too much for their audiences to handle in 1973. The ban evaporated quickly once the numbers started coming in. Behind Closed Doors hit #1 on the country chart and stayed there for 2 weeks, crossed over to number 15 on the pop chart, and swept the CMA Awards that year. Album of the Year, Single of the Year, and Male Vocalist of the Year all went to Charlie Rich. He also won the Grammy for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. The song that radio said was too suggestive became the most awarded country record of its year and launched the most successful run of Rich's career. 5 more top 10 hits followed in the next 2 years. 13 years of trying, and the one that broke through was the one the programmers said no to first.
When we get behind closed.
Number 10, Tanya Tucker, Would You Lay With Me in a Field of Stone, 1974.
Would you lay with me?
David Allan Coe wrote this song, and producer Billy Sherrill handed it to Tanya Tucker, who was 15 years old at the time of recording. And that combination alone was enough to make country radio deeply uncomfortable before anyone had heard a single note. The song asks a lover to stay through poverty, hunger, cold, and storm, and the imagery is physical, and the devotion it describes is unmistakably adult.
Road dry, would you wed?
Tucker delivered the performance with a full-throated assurance that left no room for anyone to pretend she was too young to understand what she was singing, and several radio stations refused significant airplay specifically because of the tension between her age and the song's subject matter. Programmers were not sure what to do with a 15-year-old girl who sang like a woman who had lived twice that long.
If my lips were dry.
The controversy followed the song through its entire chart run, with opinion divided between those who thought the recording was a showcase of raw talent and those who thought it never should have been made in the first place. That division played out in rotation decisions across dozens of markets, with some stations treating it as a smash and others avoiding it entirely.
From my dying hand.
None of the resistance stopped it. Would You Lay With Me topped the country chart in March 1974 and became Tucker's third #1 hit. She was still finishing high school. The song that made radio executives nervous made Tanya Tucker a fully established star before she was old enough to vote.
Were strong, would you lay with?
Number 9, Dolly Parton, The Bargain Store, 1975.
My life is likened to a bargain.
Parton wrote this song as a metaphor, a woman who has been through heartbreak comparing herself to the merchandise in a thrift store, worn and secondhand, but still valuable, still worth someone's time and love. The songwriting is tender and sad and quietly hopeful. And Parton later said in her memoir that she swore on her life she was never thinking about the subject in any vulgar way when she wrote it. One line stopped country radio cold. You can easily afford the price, and programmers across the country decided independently and almost simultaneously that the line was a thinly veiled reference to prostitution. Multiple stations dropped it from rotation before it had a chance to find its audience, and the decision was widespread enough to generate real industry attention at the time. Parton was genuinely baffled and said so publicly. She wrote in her 2020 book Songteller that the song was about resilience and a broken heart, not anything else, and that somehow this lyric is a dirty thing to a man. But I never saw it that way. The gap between what she meant and what radio heard said more about the programmers than it did about the song. The ban had no practical effect. The Bargain Store hit #1 on the Hot Country Songs chart in March 1975 and became Parton's 5th consecutive #1 single, a run few artists in any era have matched. The song radio called a prostitution reference is now considered one of the finest pieces of songwriting in her catalog. Number 8, Merle Haggard, Okie from Muskogee, 1969.
We don't smoke marijuana.
And Haggard wrote this song on a tour bus rolling through Muskogee, Oklahoma in 1969, after his drummer made a joke about what small-town people must think of the hippie protesters they kept seeing on the evening news. Haggard turned the joke into a song in under an hour, And he later said he meant it as a satirical take, a protest to the protesters, not a genuine conservative manifesto. The country chart had other ideas.
We still wave Old Glory down.
The song hit #1 almost immediately and became the unofficial anthem of what Richard Nixon called the silent majority. Working-class Americans who wanted someone in country music to say out loud what they believed about Vietnam, long hair, and flag burning. Nixon himself became one of Haggard's most vocal public fans, which was not exactly the association Haggard had in mind. Left-leaning stations and college radio formats refused to play it as reactionary propaganda, while certain right-leaning stations treated it like a patriotic hymn and looped it constantly, meaning the song was both banned and overplayed at the same time, depending entirely on where you were standing. Haggard spent years trying to explain what he actually meant and largely failed. By 2003, he was telling interviewers, "I was dumb as a rock when I wrote Okie from Muskogee," and he was not entirely joking. The song had attached a political identity to him that he never fully wanted and never fully escaped. It won the CMA Award for Song of the Year in 1970 and remains one of the most argued over 3 minutes in country music history.
Being free.
Number 7, Waylon Jennings, Are You Sure Hank Done It This Way? 1975. Jennings wrote this song on the back of an envelope the night before he walked into the studio to record it, and it was the most direct thing he had ever said to the Nashville establishment, which was saying something because Waylon Jennings had been saying difficult things to Nashville for years. The song asked a single-pointed question. Did Hank Williams do it with rhinestone suits, tour buses, and polished studio sessions that excluded the band? The answer was no, and Jennings knew it, because he had spent years fighting RCA Records for the right to record with his own band. In a studio he chose on a schedule he set. He had literally shouted, "I want off the label" down the hallways of the RCA offices until a weary Chet Atkins finally relented and gave him creative control. The song was the first thing he made with that freedom. Recorded at the Renegade studio his friend Tom Paul Glazer had built. They called it Hillbilly Central.
I think he did it like he wanted to.
Traditional country stations that were still invested in the Nashville sound quietly avoided it, and some programmers saw the song as a personal attack on the infrastructure that kept their format running. Rolling Stone later called it the closest thing outlaw country has to an official statement, which gives you some sense of the size of the target Jennings was aiming at. The song hit #1 on the country chart in 1975, and Jennings went on to skip his own induction ceremony for the Country Music Hall of Fame and asked to be buried in Arizona rather than Nashville. He wrote the song on an envelope the night before. He meant every word of it. Number 6, Conway Twitty, You've Never Been This Far Before, 1973.
I can almost hear the stillness as it...
Twitty wrote this song himself, and the subject matter was not ambiguous. The song is about a man comforting a woman who is experiencing physical intimacy for the very first time, and lines like, "My trembling fingers touch forbidden places," and "I can tell you've never been this far before," left very little for the listener's imagination to fill in. That Twitty managed to be this explicit without technically using a single objectionable word made it harder, not easier, for radio to handle.
To the sound of your heartbeat.
Many stations banned it after receiving calls from outraged listeners, and programmers who had no trouble playing other suggestive material in 1973 drew the line specifically here, apparently because Twitty had found a way to be more precise about the subject than anything they had encountered before in mainstream country. The clarity of the imagery was the problem.
Or before.
The controversy did nothing to slow it down. The song spent 3 weeks at #1 in the summer of 1973 and became one of the most widely discussed country records of the decade. The kind of song that people talked about even if they claimed not to have listened to it. Twitty later said the controversy only made audiences more curious, which was exactly right.
Before.
Music historians have noted that You've Never Been This Far Before effectively opened a door. In the 2 years following its release, Loretta Lynn's The Pill and Tanya Tucker's Would You Lay With Me both became #1 hits, following the trail Twitty had cleared. He walked up to the line, kept walking, and the genre followed.
You're taking
We are halfway through the list and the stories only get wilder from here. You have got 5 songs left, and every single one of them hit #1 while radio was trying to kill it. If you are watching Old Trails Archive for the first time, now is the perfect moment to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We cover classic country history every week, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. Drop a comment below and tell us which band story has surprised you the most so far. And if someone in your life loves classic country, share this video with them right now. 5 songs left. Let us finish this. Number 5, Johnny Paycheck, Take This Job and Shove It, 1977.
Take this job and shove it. I ain't working.
David Allan Coe wrote this song originally intending it for George Jones, but Jones did not show up for the recording session, and producer Billy Sherrill called Coe and asked if Johnny Paycheck could cut it instead. That accident of scheduling produced one of the most culturally embedded songs in country music history, a record so perfectly timed it entered the American language as a fixed phrase within months of its release.
All the reason I've been working for.
The song was built on a single idea, a man who has worked long and hard at a job that never rewarded him, finally saying out loud the thing every working person had wanted to say for years. Some radio programmers were wary of the bluntness, concerned that advertisers would object to a song that was essentially a middle finger aimed at the workforce structure that sustained their sponsors. Certain stations held it at arm's length. None of that hesitation lasted long once the audience found it. Take This Job and Shove It hit #1 in January 1978 and spent 2 weeks there, was certified platinum, and became Paycheck's only #1 hit after years of struggling on the margins of the format. The song also produced a follow-on rift between Paycheck and Coe. Paycheck appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson and described it as being by some guy in Nashville, which Coe never fully forgave.
Line boss, he's a fool.
The phrase "take this job and shove it" became so embedded in American speech that it was later used as the title of a film, multiple television episodes, and dozens of parody versions across different industries. Coe had written the song because he felt it. Paycheck sang it because he felt it too. And every person who had ever wanted to say it felt it loudest of all.
I've been working for. Don't you try.
Number 4, Jeannie C. Riley, Harper Valley PTA, 1968.
Tell you all a story about a Harper Valley.
Tom T. Hall wrote this song in 20 minutes, loosely based on a real situation he had heard about, and it landed with the force of a town meeting going spectacularly wrong. The song follows a widow who receives a letter from the local PTA calling out her behavior, short skirts, drinking, running around, and who shows up at the next meeting to read aloud the personal sins of every person who signed it. It is a precision-guided missile aimed at small-town hypocrisy, and it hit exactly what it was aiming at. Riley recorded it for Plantation Records, a tiny independent label, and it became the fastest-climbing country pop crossover of 1968, hitting #1 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and the country chart and making Riley the first woman to simultaneously top both charts with the same song. Then the battle started and lasted well into the 1970s, with school boards across the South and Midwest banning the song from student performances and radio stations in conservative markets pulling it from rotation under pressure from community groups.
He said, Mama got a note here from the Harper Valley PT.
The irony of those bans was not lost on anyone paying attention. A song whose entire point was that the people with the most moral authority, judge were the ones with the most to hide, was being suppressed by exactly the kind of institutions the song described. Every band made the argument for the song more convincingly than the song made it for itself.
Secretary Harper Valley PTA.
The controversy inspired a 1978 feature film and a short-lived 1981 television series, and the song has been covered continuously for 5 decades by artists who recognize that the PTA in Harper Valley never really closed its doors. Jeannie C. Riley got one shot at the top of both charts. She used it to start an argument that is still going.
Note that Mrs. Johnson, you're wearing your dress this way.
Number 3, Loretta Lynn, The Pill, 1975.
You whine me and dine me.
Lynn's record label sat on this song for 3 full years before they released it. She had recorded it in 1972, a frank, funny, and genuinely pointed celebration of what the birth control pill meant for a woman who was tired of repeated pregnancies, and the label kept it on ice until January 1975, hoping the timing would eventually feel safer. The timing never felt safer. They released it anyway.
Pill. all these
60 country radio stations across America refused to play it. A preacher in West Liberty, Kentucky, devoted an entire Sunday sermon to condemning Loretta Lynn and the song by name. According to People magazine's coverage at the time, that sermon sent most of his congregation straight out to buy the record, boosting sales in exactly the market he had been trying to protect. The song was selling 15,000 copies per week without meaningful airplay. The Grand Ole Opry held a 3-hour meeting to decide whether to permit Lynn to perform the song at an upcoming show. Lynn found out about the meeting afterward and told a reporter, "If they hadn't let me sing the song, I'd have told them to shove the Grand Ole Opry." The Opry did not ban it. Lynn sang it 3 times in one night and the audience asked for it again. When the song climbed high enough on the chart, the stations had no choice. Lynn later said, when it hit the charts, they had to take it out of being banned. Everybody had to play it. It peaked at number 5 on the country chart and number 70 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was her best-selling single to that point in her career. 60 stations said no. The women of America said otherwise, and they said it louder.
Since I've got the pill.
Number 2, Bobby Bare, Marie Laveau, 1974.
Down in Louisiana where the black trees grow.
Shel Silverstein, the same man who wrote beloved children's books and composed hits for Dr. Hook, co-wrote this song with Baxter Taylor about the real Marie Laveau, the legendary 19th century voodoo priestess of New Orleans who was said to dispense potions, tell fortunes, and hold the souls of the city in her hands. Silverstein and Taylor built a fictional story around her name involving a con man named Handsome Jack, who tries to trick a swamp witch out of $1 million by offering to marry her, then backs out once he has the money, calling her too ugly for a rich man. She screams, he disappears, and that scream stayed in the recording. Bobby Bare recorded the song live, kept the scream intact, and released it on his 1974 album Lullabies, Legends, and Lies. Religious broadcasters and Christian radio stations wanted nothing to do with it. A song celebrating a voodoo priestess extracting violent revenge, complete with an actual scream, was not something conservative programmers could defend to their listeners regardless of how it charted. Resistance from that segment of the radio market kept it off a meaningful portion of the country dial. The resistance did not move the needle. Marie Laveau hit number 1 on the country chart and spent 18 weeks on the charts. It was Bobby Bare's only number 1 hit across a career that stretched back to the early 1960s. It is still, to this day, the only number 1 country song in history that contains a scream. The Voodoo Queen got the last word. Number 1, Loretta Lynn, Rated X, 1972. Lynn wrote this song entirely on her own, based on what she watched happening to the divorced women around her. Women who had been married, had their marriages end, and found themselves immediately rebranded by the people who knew them. Other women spread rumors about their character. Men assumed they were available. The whole community treated a divorce like a permanent mark that followed a woman into every room she entered for the rest of her life. Lynn wrote a song that looked all of it directly in the eye. Many radio DJs refused to play Rated X before they had listened to a single second of it. The title alone convinced programmers the song was obscene, and they pulled it from consideration without ever putting it on a turntable. When some of them did listen, they still refused, because the actual content made them more uncomfortable than the title had, not because it was dirty, but because it was right. A divorced woman demanding to be treated with basic dignity in plain language was apparently more difficult for country radio to handle than an actual explicit song would have been.
People are going to look down their noses, but I don't know what to do.
Despite the resistance, the song became Loretta Lynn's 6th number 1 country hit, and the album it appeared on, Entertainer of the Year, also went to number 1. Lynn had just become the first woman to win the CMA's Entertainer of the Year award that same year, which meant that the most powerful woman in country music at that moment was also the woman radio did not want to play.
Nobody knows where you're going, but they sure know.
Decades later, Jack White of the White Stripes began including Rated X in his live sets, calling it one of the most powerful pieces of writing in American music, and the audiences who heard it agreed. The song that DJs would not touch in 1972 because they judged it by its title is still being discovered, still being covered, and still being argued about more than 50 years later. Every person who refused to play it made it last longer.
Picture if a cheap camera makes a mistake.